Welcome to Faithful, the podcast where we explore the intersection of leadership, faith, and impact. I'm your host, Christopher Swing, President and CEO of Vantage Surgical Solutions. Through thoughtful conversations with business leaders, missionaries, and changemakers, we uncover the principles that guide their work and connect them to timeless wisdom. In Season 1, we're diving into the foundational organizations and experiences that shaped my own leadership journey. Whether you're a leader in business, faith, or your community, this conversation is packed with inspiration and practical wisdom. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovering how faith and leadership intersect in meaningful ways. Let's dive into the episode.
Welcome back to Faithful. I have the great opportunity to be here with Dr. Josh Bullock, the president of Lakeland College. For those of you who may not know, this is kind of the starting point of my, post-high school education. I needed that stepping stone between high school and university, and I came to Lakeland College, and there were a bunch of people that latched on to me. Their names are rolling through my head as we're sitting here, and most of them aren't here anymore because that was quite a while ago. But they did have a lasting impact, and I was a student ambassador here. I was very engaged in the college campus, mainly worked in the admissions side of things. I think I was even a part-time employee for a while, which, makes me look back and wonder what they were thinking back then. It was a great experience for me, and that's why this is part of the foundational series. And I've had a lot of opportunity to get to know Josh over the years, and just an amazing gentleman that truly embodies a lot of the leadership qualities that are important to me. And I think enabled me to see the appropriate way to handle myself back when maybe I was still pretty young and bull in the china shop-ish, and helped me to grow, I think, into who I am as a leader today. So pleasure to have you today, Dr. Bullock, and I look forward to getting some of your feedback and some of your leadership perspectives as we walk through today's episode.
Well, thanks, Chris. And I'm honored to be here and humbled. And I want to thank you because I know even after your Lakeland experience, you've stayed engaged and involved, which good leaders do, to help make a difference for future generations, being involved with our foundation and some of the work you've done to ensure that others have opportunities for education. Kudos for that.
So looking back on your career, what leadership principles do you feel like guided you the most?
Well, I think what's guided me the most, Chris, probably is my father. And that's probably a cliche for many individuals. But my dad, and I'll share a story maybe in a bit, but he was one of the kindest, humblest leaders I've ever known. And what he taught me early on about leadership was it takes a village. It takes everybody in the organization to help move forward. And that really stuck with me, whether it was someone who was making sure your buildings were clean, to someone who was teaching in the classroom, to someone who was leading the organization. Everybody has a role, and no one's role is more important than another. Every role is critical to an organization. And that's really guided me, that everybody deserves that dignity and respect in their role and to be respected for what they bring to the organization. And it probably dovetails with servant leadership. That idea that as leaders, our goal is to help others be successful. It should never be about how do we make ourselves successful, but how do we help others become successful and find their right path, whether it's within an organization. For us as educators, it's whether it's a student who's looking to be educated. But that principle of servant leadership and reminding ourselves every day that every single one of us has an important role in our organization, it still guides me today.
So I'm not terribly surprised that one of your parents guided you. I mean, I think that's true of most of us. Did your dad have a leadership role in an organization?
He did. And so I just want to share a little bit about my dad's story because I think it really speaks to how he evolved as a leader and how it's impacted my life. So my father at age 10, December 3rd, 1942, his mother passed away, and there were 12 kids in the family. And at 10 years old, his father couldn't afford to keep all of the children, so some of his siblings went into an orphanage. And my father at 10 years old went and knocked on doors of farms to see if someone would take him in so he could work to support them, and also for room and board and food. And he was lucky enough to find a family that took him in so he could finish grade school, finish high school. And he knew that for him, education was going to be an important part of his life. And he had no funds, no resources. And so he went into the military, enlisted in the military during the end of the Korean War, and used the GI Bill to get an education. That's really where he met my mother, was in college. And so I'm thankful he did that, because I wouldn't be here otherwise. But while he was in college, or right before he went to college, I should say, after he got out of the military, he contracted tuberculosis. And the reason he went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison was because that's where they placed him to get his treatment, was at the hospital in Madison. He was from out east, so he didn't know Wisconsin. And he was in a tuberculosis ward for over a year. And he was the only person in his ward who didn't pass away from tuberculosis. And that, he said, really impacted his life and really got him to think about cherishing what was important in life. And he was a very strong Christian. It made him very spiritual. But he always told me that carried over into his work life and what helped him grow as a leader, because as he moved through organizations, people wanted to work with him because he respected everybody, treated everybody exactly the same, no matter what role they had in the organization. That him sharing these stories with me helped form who I am and what I believe in, and the importance of treating everybody with that dignity and respect. And I'm sure there are a lot of stories like that out there. My father wrote a book about it called No Bull. Before he passed away, he just wanted to capture his life's journey. It's a testament to what can happen when you realize it does take a village of people to make the world go round. And so that's what inspired me, and it still inspires me as a leader today.
Wow, that gives me goosebumps.
Faithful is proudly sponsored by Vantage Surgical Solutions, where excellence meets innovation in advanced healthcare solutions. With a foundation built on integrity, creativity, and commitment, Vantage empowers leaders to shape the future, just as we explore leadership through faith on the podcast. Vantage Surgical Solutions, standing for excellence, leading advanced healthcare solutions.
So, I think about the organization that you lead, and it's a diverse group of students, a diverse group of faculty and staff. How do you ensure everyone feels heard and valued? We get where it comes from, but how do you effectively put that into practice?
It's probably one of the hardest things in any organization. I think you'll hear that. Pick any organization, the one thing they'll say is the hardest challenge is communication. Being heard, feeling heard. And so I don't think anybody's perfect. I am absolutely not perfect at that by any stretch. But I think one of the important pieces is creating safe spaces for people to voice their opinions, and doing that in a non-judgmental setting where you have the recognition that we may not always agree. Someone may share a perspective that I don't agree with, or I may share a perspective they don't agree with. But making sure that it doesn't become personal, that you have a safe space for people to share those perspectives. Recognizing everybody has beliefs and opinions. Everybody comes from different walks of life, so our backgrounds are different. What our experiences are very different. And taking time to appreciate that. It doesn't necessarily always mean that it's going to change a decision, but making sure that you at least give that opportunity for someone's voice to be heard. And again, recognizing that disagreement doesn't have to be personal. We can disagree on an issue, and I can talk with staff members and at least allow them to hear my perspective and allow myself to hear their perspective, but recognize in the end, we may agree to disagree, but having the respect to at least hear each other out. And maybe in some points it will impact our decision-making process, or it will have influence on the things we do. And I think that's really important to any organization, to having that structure in those safe spaces to communicate.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value there, and something that maybe our federal government could use a little bit of experience with these days. It just doesn't seem like we have the level of conversations, and some of those conversations can be difficult conversations.
Absolutely. The difficult conversations are those we tend to avoid the most. It's easy to have a conversation where we agree, where you're talking to someone who has the same mindset. It's the difficult conversations that most people avoid because most people don't like conflict. But I think you can have those conversations without making it a conflict situation, where you can come in and agree that we don't necessarily see eye to eye on the issue, but that's not going to impact my relationship with you personally, that I'll still respect you after that conversation.
So, what are some of the key moments in your leadership here at Lakeland College that have reinforced your commitment to putting people first?
Oh boy. I think probably the biggest would be the budget crisis of 2015 that we faced as institutions. So as many in Illinois know, we went 2 years without any state funding. And for a small rural community college, state funding is really critical to our survival. And so when that hit, many of our peer institutions across the state started laying off staff. They tried to balance their budget. We really had that moment where we worked with our board of trustees and said, listen, we've always talked about being a family. And that doesn't mean families always agree, but we're a family and we have each other's back. And now is the time really to prove it. And so we went through the budget crisis and retained almost all of our staff. We didn't lose any faculty. We made a commitment to say we're going to weather this storm because we know there's going to be a rainbow at the end of the storm, right? That eventually we'll get state funding. And so we said we're going to do all we can to keep the college afloat. And that included the Department of Corrections program. So as a college, we're the largest provider of correctional education in the state. We serve 23 adult facilities where we have full-time staff, full-time associate dean, full-time support that provide education. At that time as well, the state of Illinois didn't have the resources to pay its bills for us, for the Department of Corrections. And we realized as an educational institution as well, one of the most important things we can do is maintain that educational experience for those students who are incarcerated, because ours is about providing hope and a path to something better. And where else is that shown than in the Department of Corrections, where we're helping somebody gain a skill before they're released so they can come out on a real positive foot? I'll tell you, it was challenging times, but it really demonstrated that we were a family, and it taught me a lot about leadership because we were nervous. We approached our bargaining units and said, listen, I know we have contracts in place for wage increases, but if you're willing to do this for us, we'll make sure that none of your staff will lose their jobs. We're going to make that commitment. And, I give them a lot of credit. They all stepped up to the plate and said, yes, we're willing to partner with you, because it was important to them to keep the Lakeland family together as well. And that to me was kind of another epiphany of leadership, that we can accomplish a lot more when we do things together and really work together than we can in isolation.
So you hit on one of the topics that I love to talk about, and it seems to be a pretty significant dichotomy in the leadership world. And you do the same thing that I do, so we're on the same side of the coin. But we like to consider our organizations a family. And that seems to be a hot topic. And I don't know why it's such a hot topic, because I've had some of the best arguments, and by best, I mean like the most heated arguments with anyone with my family. And we agree to disagree at times as a family. But it seems like in the leadership world, there's so many out there that are suggesting that it's not a family, like it's supposed to be a professional sports team or something. They pick all these analogies that supposedly break this idea or concept that we're a family. And I don't know what you think about that. Everything that maybe our values are just different than the people that believe that. But I firmly believe that, I look out, I have much more empathy, and I have much more desire to see my organization or the people that work for us succeed than I do for the general population. And so to me, that is similar and indicative to my experience with my own family. Do you have any thoughts? I just noticed that you'd said the family, and I thought I was intrigued by that. So
I agree with you. I think if you think about those who work, I mean, my gosh, we spend as much time in the workplace as we do at home, and we get to know the people we work with. And much like a family, you have those who you work very closely with, who might be like your siblings in your family structure. You have those who might be your cousins. You might have those who are your second cousins. But I do think there's something to that fact that we are family. I mean, case in point, think about when you have someone at work that goes through a traumatic health issue. Look at how people rally around and help raise money and provide meals and help them with around their house. I mean, that's what a family does. And so I think we can have family at work. It doesn't mean that it's always going to be perfect, but no family is. But I completely agree with you. I think we do make connections at work we wouldn't make with others outside of an organization.
Yeah, and all of us have a crazy uncle or somebody in their family, so it's not like you can say, "Oh, well, everybody's family's perfect." At least mine wasn't. So maybe that's part of the problem is I had a crazy family. But no, I really feel that way of my team, and I mean, shoot, the only difference between my home family and my work family is I get to pick the people that are part of my team. Right. At work, and at home, I just, it's whatever it is. Anyways, what qualities do you believe are essential for a leader in higher education today?
There are some that I think are really critical. Probably the most important in today's environment is a sense of humor. It is so easy to get bogged down in all of the challenges that surround us in every way, shape, and form, federally, on the state level, just demographically, all the things that burden us as institutions and leaders. And you need to have a sense of humor and not take yourself too seriously as well as a leader. And I think that also dovetails with just having patience. And as you said, Chris, the compassion, having when you work with individuals, having compassion for those people that you might treat as your family. But you also need to be a disciplined risk taker. Think of innovation as being something that's not scary, but something that can be invigorating for an organization. That's a pretty critical piece. And just being open-minded as a leader, and at least for us in higher education today as a leader, and it's probably the same in the corporate world, having fiscal acumen is ever more essential than it would have been in the past. The fiscal management of organizations has become so complex that that's something I think all leaders really need to take seriously, is understanding the fiscal impact of the organization. That's pretty critical. And being data-driven in general. We have access to a wealth of data, and I think AI is accelerating that access to data. And being able to truly understand data and sift through it, I think, from a technical perspective, is really important for leaders today.
Yeah, and so I just want to reiterate that we have someone in higher ed that's talking about innovation, and I think that gives you some perspective of where Lakeland is, because those are oxymorons, in my opinion. Like, when I think of higher ed, I think of this is how we've always done it, and this is how we're going to continue to do it. And my experience at Lakeland is very different from that perspective, and I think you guys do a great job. So Lakeland's been recognized for student success initiatives, and many of them. The thing that I think is most intriguing about an organization like Lakeland College is it really gives access to people who maybe otherwise couldn't seek furthering their education. And that could be in a multitude of ways. You could get a certificate specific to workforce type education and learning how to do a skill or whatever, or you could get a degree that's going to transfer somewhere else. And I think that's what is so intriguing, and probably why the governor is looking at ways to expand, ways to utilize organizations like yours. What drives your passion for making education accessible?
I think a number of things. I shared my dad's story, and I wouldn't be here if there weren't means for him to have education accessible and affordable. As a young man, poor, growing up in rural Vermont with no access to resources, he realized the military, as I mentioned, provided the opportunity for education. So for me, it is so important that as community colleges, we are available and accessible to everybody. So many of our residents in our communities, they struggle financially. To not have accessible higher education for them where it's affordable and there's financial help available, they wouldn't come. They wouldn't be able to find their passion or find that guiding light that's going to help them pursue a career path. And so that's a big piece of it, is understanding that our communities need us. Our communities want that desire to better themselves and find a good path. And correctional education is the same way. Every time I attend a correctional center commencement, I mean, I've been at tears at some of the commencements. I'll share a story that years ago I was at a commencement, and a young man who was the valedictorian, they always let the valedictorian speak, came up to me afterwards, and it was right before the holidays, right before Christmas. And he said to me, "I just want to thank you and Lakeland College for helping me get my degree." And I said, "Well, you're welcome." And I hear that a lot from individuals. So I just, thank you. I appreciate that. And the young man was probably in his mid-30s. And he looked at me and he said, I don't think you understand what this really means to me. He said, I've been incarcerated since I was a teenager, and my parents are visiting me, and this is the first time in my life I can show them that I'm worthy and I can accomplish something. And that, to me, I mean, I started tearing up because, we see it every day, the impact that we have, but to hear those personal stories, that tells you how important the work is that we do to provide opportunities.
I think that's amazing. I think it's a blessing to our communities. And to be honest, it fills gaps in many places. I don't know if anybody's tried to get a tradesperson lately, but there are so many things that we need people to be seeking education in. And I think this is a great place for them to land to be able to provide some of those services. I mean, it's crazy how long you have to wait to get something simple done at your house anymore.
Absolutely. There's a shortage of skilled workers. We know there is, and we have those opportunities to help meet those workforce demands while providing someone an education that's going to be a life-sustaining salary and career.
So how do you ensure that the culture at Lakeland prioritizes this student growth, both academically and personally?
I think I've been blessed to be able to carry on a long-standing tradition from many presidents going years back that have really fostered within Lakeland College that student-first mindset and always asking the question, what's best for students? And I've been honored to be able to carry on that tradition. And I think that's something that is alive and well at Lakeland, is always considering what we can do to help students, that student-first mindset. And it goes along with that family culture we talked about, making sure that it's not just the staff that feel part of the family, but making sure the students feel part of the family, that when they have a question or they're feeling down or maybe they're feeling uncertain, they can always reach out to somebody at the college. So it takes some shepherding, but it is so ingrained in who we are in our culture as an institution that I never worry that people are out there not thinking about what's always in the best interest of our student.
Yeah, and I'll tell you just from my perspective, I'm biased, and I was more engaged than the average student, though I did lose the vote to be student trustee. I will say while I was here, and I'm still a little bitter about that. To Darcy, I can't remember what her last name was, but I do think that I experienced what it's like to be first. And that was true when I was here, and I can't imagine that that's changed. And so that's one of the strengths of the college. So can you share a story of a student or a program that stands out as success kind of under your leadership? And I know that, I'll be honest with you, that story about the student in the prison system about brought me to tears. That's I can just imagine what it was like for him. But anyways.
Yeah, there are so many stories that really speak to the success of not me, the success of Lakeland College. And that I'll share another correctional story because this is one that literally left me stunned when it happened. And I've shared it around the college, and because it was so powerful. Oftentimes we forget the impact that we all have. We go about our day-to-day routine and we forget that something that might occur for us on a regular basis might be the first time for a student. So last year I was in Chicago and I was attending a conference, and I was in the hotel lobby with my wife, and we were just talking, and a young man came up to me, and he said, he was probably maybe early 30s. And he said, hey, could you take a picture of my friend and I in front of this beautiful statue that was in the lobby of this hotel? I said, absolutely. So he handed me his phone and I took a picture. He looked at me and he said, I know you from somewhere. You're famous. I can assure you I am not famous. And he said, no, I do. I know you from somewhere. You look so familiar. And I said, well, I can tell you I'm not famous. I work for a community college. I'm president of a community college. I'm here for a conference. And his eyes lit up and he said, that's where I know you from. He said, you're the president of Lakeland College. And I said, I am. How did you know that? And he said, well, I was a student while I was incarcerated. And he said, you came to our commencement and you talked with me and I told you what I wanted to do. And I said, my goal was to eventually get my doctorate and help other people in my situation. And you looked at me and he said, you know what? You can do whatever you put your mind to. You've got the talent to do that. And he smiled and he looked at me and he said, I'm here in Chicago working on my doctorate. in social justice. He said, my goal is to help those who've been in my situation. And Chris, I was literally speechless. I didn't know what to say. And what it reminded me of was that our words matter. So many students, when they share their story, you give them that encouragement and let them know they've gotten this far and they've got the ability. But to personalize that and the impact it had on a single individual, to know that our words matter, and what may seem to us, because we talk to so many individuals throughout our day, that those words matter to that individual. And I think that speaks to us everything we do, whether it's helping a student who can't find directions on campus, whether it's talking to somebody on the phone who's frustrated, our words matter. And that's had a profound impact on me as a leader. And I mean, my gosh, how proud I am of that student who is working on their dissertation now, coming from a correctional background, because they felt encouraged throughout their educational journey, not just from me, but from the people that they worked with. And that there are so many of those stories that make what we do such a humbling and rewarding experience at the same time.
Great story. So I think about my community service and what that has done for me as a leader. And I encourage you guys all the time to get involved because, well, two things. First of all, I always say the same thing, and that is that a lot of times I got involved because of some level of frustration with something that was going on. And then once I got involved, I realized I knew nothing about what was actually going on. But in addition to that, the real advantage that you get is it's great training. Like, it's such a great way to see how organizations operate differently. I frequently talk to you guys about my experience on the board of the bank that I sit on as the vice chair. And that's probably one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in my career. And it's because I see so many different things. And I get to experience through other people what to do and what not to do. But Josh and I had the opportunity to serve together on the FEM Chamber of Commerce board, and he's involved significantly more in the community than I'll ever be. And I think part of that is just who you are as a person, but I also think that you really wanted to engage in our community and make that visible, and that, this organization was here for the community. And I'm really appreciative of that. But my question for you is, how has that involvement influenced your perspective on leadership and the community, and maybe even further than that, also community engagement?
I think as leaders, we have an obligation to be involved in our communities. And I love your story, Chris, because I think sometimes leaders go into a situation thinking, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to fix it because there's something I don't like about a situation, where the reality is leadership is about coming into an organization and collectively helping to make that organization or that community better. You think about community service and how many people are involved from all walks of life in so many organizations, whether it's a civic organization or a social support organization, and they come into it with the desire to help. And I think, again, as leaders, we have an obligation to be part of those conversations and to find ways to lift our community up, to grow the future leaders. Because as we do that, as you mentioned, just engaging with people on a board, you might have people on that board who've been on there 6 or 7 years where you're new and you learn from them. And, that's part of passing on that torch. One of my favorite quotes, and it's from an old Greek proverb, and I'll kind of share it in my way, is that a true leader is someone who plants a tree whose shade they'll never enjoy. And, that is absolutely true. That if we're truly wanting to engage for the right reasons, it shouldn't be about us. It should be about the collective of all of us working together. One of my other favorite stories is the bridge builder. And I don't know if you've ever heard that story. And I'll paraphrase this as well, because I think it also speaks to why we need to be involved in our communities and why we need to be involved on school boards and civic organization boards. And again, not from a position of power, but from a position of wanting to help make things better for everyone. So there's a story about the bridge builder. It's about a gentleman who's walking from point A to try to get to the big city. And he gets to a point where he reaches this huge, huge chasm, like the Grand Canyon. And he realizes the only way he can get to his goal at the city is to traverse this canyon. And so he spends days climbing down one side of the canyon, gets to the bottom, rests, and spends days climbing up the next side of the canyon. And as soon as he gets to the other side of the canyon, he starts building a bridge going back to the other side. And as he's building that bridge, a passerby walks up and says, "Sir, what are you doing? Why are you building that bridge? You've struggled already to go down one side of the canyon and up the other. You've made it. What are you doing?" And he said, "I did make it. But my goal is to ensure that the path of those who follow me doesn't have to be as challenging as mine." And that's why we participate and be involved in the community, is to ensure that those who are using social services or in our school districts, that they have the tools and resources to be successful the way we did. It's about giving back. So I've loved being involved in the community. Again, something I learned from my father, who was involved wherever he could be, that is our obligation. We have an obligation as part of being in a society to help out and use our talents to help others.
Faithful is brought to you by Vantage Surgical Solutions, where we believe in progress through passion. If you're inspired by innovation and excellence in healthcare, we invite you to join our team. At Vantage, we're not just shaping the future of healthcare, we're empowering individuals to make a difference. Visit our careers page to explore opportunities and see if your journey aligns with ours. Vantage Surgical Solutions, where passion meets purpose.
So that pretty much plays right into my next question. So, what role do you see Lakeland playing in strengthening the community here?
Well, as a community college, our formal name has community right in the name. Our formal statutory name is Community College District 517. It's in our name. We really encourage all of our staff members to get involved and to get on the civic boards, the school boards, to be a voice for their community at Lakeland College, but also to be a voice for our students in Lakeland College within the community. I think we play a really significant role. We were founded in 1966. The taxpayers voted to create Lakeland College. And again, I think from an institutional perspective, we have an obligation to our communities to be engaged. And so we all promote getting involved. We have staff that serve on all kinds of boards, and oftentimes they do that during their workday because it is so related to what we do as a community college. So to me, that civic engagement from a college perspective is critical to who we are. It's critical to our foundation.
So I was going to ask you a different question, but I'm going to change it up because I think we've pretty much answered that one. And that is, how can people in our community engage with Lakeland College to help?
Great question. There are so many ways to get engaged. Our foundation board that you served on, talk about serving on our foundation board. Come serve on an advisory committee. We have times when we have all of our programs that work with industry put together advisory committees. Come in and help us formulate those advisory committees. Come get engaged on campus events. We have campus events on a weekly basis. Come to campus, engage with the students. Come be a classroom speaker. Even if you don't think you have a talent, if you have something to share, come offer that. Because we're trying to help our students see a well-rounded perspective about all issues, and we welcome that. If you have something you want to share, come put on a presentation in our theater for students. There are so many ways as a community college for individuals to get involved. We welcome that. We welcome that level of involvement. If you have thoughts to share or ideas, call one of us up. Call one of the leaders up and say, "Hey, I have an idea or a thought that I want to share." That's again part of who we are as a community college.
So now, obviously, we know Josh as you are today, and there was a process, right, where you started from and where you are. What leadership habits or disciplines have helped to grow the most?
Boy, that's a really good question. And I think for many leaders, there's such an evolution in so many habits that we develop over time that maybe we forget that they're habits. For me, one of the things I love is, if you've ever done colors, I'm very green. So I love data. I love learning. I love reading. So I'm a voracious reader. It just helps keep me grounded as to what's happening in the industry. But I think one of my other habits is relying on the people around you. Leadership is not a singular activity. It's, as we've talked throughout this conversation, it's really a collective activity. Rely on those people around you, I found, has been extremely important. My father always told me, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And I think what he meant was surround yourself with people who have different talents, backgrounds, experiences, because that's going to make for stronger decisions. But don't just surround yourself with people like that. Listen to them. Don't think that because you're a leader, you're in the chair that makes the decisions. I mean, in some cases, ultimately that may be the case, but in many, you have to rely on those teams around you. And that's probably the habit that I use the most, is relying on the people around me, because we're human beings just like everybody else, and we don't have all the answers. We might have tools to help us decipher the answers from all the information we garner, but that's critical. And I think the other discipline is just keep yourself informed. Don't ever stop learning, because what might have worked or what might have been something successful even 2 or 3 years ago, it might not be the same tools. Who would have thought AI would have come around? It'll be 3 years this coming December, and transformed what we do already in such a short period of time. So don't ever become complacent. Really think about that habit of continually learning.
So who are some of the people, and I know you mentioned your dad, and hopefully you'll further expound upon that if this is who you think of, but who are some of the people or experiences that have shaped your approach to leading an institution like Lakeland College?
You're right. My dad was, again, probably one of my biggest influences for how to lead. But even at Lakeland College, there have been people that have shaped who I am as a leader at the college as well. And I think some of those people, Bob Luther. Bob Luther is a titan of community colleges, not just in Illinois, but in the nation. He was an amazing man. And he really, as a trustee, was kind of my mentor. And he always said, I'm not here to lead the college. I've done that. My goal is to support you. And he's the one that would always remind me, every time we were thinking through decisions, he would remind me, remember, we're here for the students. The students must come first. And so he was very influential. I think of Tina Stovall, our former vice president for student service, someone who I respect just tremendously. And she was the type of person, when you'd be in a meeting, would always ask the questions to get you to think completely different than how you were thinking. And not in a way that was confrontational, but truly out of a leadership position of saying, let's think about these other perspectives. And I so appreciated that she would say, well, what about this? And get you to think differently, and always reminded us about the importance of treating our staff with dignity and respect, and always remembering that our students have a completely different perspective than we do. We might be comfortable where we're at. We might have financial security, but many of them don't. And so from Tina I still respect her as a leader, one of my favorite leaders I've ever had the chance to work with. And then other trustees like Mike Sullivan, who 37 years on our board of trustees, but brought so much history and used history as a tool to help us understand, not as a way to say, well, we should be doing this because that's how we've always done that. And I've learned so much from Mike in that respect, and the importance of looking at our history as a tool to help us make future decisions, as a guide, but not as a blueprint. And so those are some people I've relied on, and I've relied on my faith. Faith is very important to thinking about how we behave and act as human beings and as individuals. And as I reflect back as a Christian, how Jesus worked as a leader. And Jesus didn't spend his time working as a leader talking only or specifically to the Pharisees and the kings. As a matter of fact, it was just the opposite. It was the lepers and those who were less fortunate who he built his strength from. And I think that's been a lesson for me as a leader, again, as reminding us who we're here to serve and hearing that voice. We're not going to always necessarily go to hear the voices of the existing kings or Pharisees, those who are in positions of power, but listening to those who aren't in the positions of power to understand their needs. So all those facets have shaped me as a leader, and I'm sure every leader has stories of those people who bring just some piece of themselves to our leadership journey and give us that piece that helps. They might not be a brick in our leadership wall that we build, but it might be the grout that goes into the wall. So all the people that we interact with that help build who we are as leaders.
Oh, that was a blast from the past, because I experienced every one of those people, and I have extremely fond memories of every single person you talked about. And I couldn't agree more with all of your perspectives. I mean, even back to Dr. Luther and the Stovalls, both of them are just phenomenal folks.
Yes.
I just have a lot of personal value for both Jeff and Tina. Mike Sullivan, wow. I spent a lot of time with Mike. So Very cool. If there was one key lesson that you could pass to the next generation of leaders in higher ed, or even maybe a student that's going out to be a leader, what would it be?
Boy, my lesson, I think, would simply be yourself. Be yourself as a leader. Don't take yourself too seriously. When you think about how many leaders don't smile, don't laugh, they scowl, they enter a room and really treat everything as if it's the most serious thing on the planet. And we're all just human beings trying to do our best. As leaders, we may be misunderstood at times because, again, as human beings, we're just trying to do the best we can for our organizations. It doesn't mean we'll always make the right decisions, but I think knowing that we all do our best to make the right decisions, and that comes with if you're going to ask people to follow, make sure they know who you really are, because folks aren't going to follow somebody who's not true to themselves. And I know all of us as leaders have to understand that there are going to be people that don't like who we are. And, that's okay, because we're not going to want to have coffee with everybody we interact with or be friends with them. It comes down to that respect. But for new leaders, don't try to be something you're not. Be yourself and never take yourself too seriously. If you can't laugh at yourself, I mean, my gosh, you have to be able to laugh at yourself, because we all do things that we scratch our head and say, wow, I can't believe I did that. So, and it gives people the freedom to be themselves as well, and to realize it's okay to make mistakes and own up to those. And hey, you fall up the stairs walking to commencement and you may say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. But it just reinforces, you know what? We're just as human as the next person, and we all have our challenges. So yeah, be yourself.
I think that's great advice. And, the other thing I will tell you is kind of, I think, leading to what Dr. Bullock was saying, which is, you have to use the information that you have. And in those situations where you have to make a decision, you have to be committed to that decision. But when information comes around that says, hey, that was the wrong decision, you need to pivot. That's part of being a leader, but it's also creating that safe space for your employees to do the same thing. I'm a big fan of Mark Kohler's, which is he was a submarine captain, and they don't always know everything they need to know to make the best decision. So they make the decision in between 40 and 70% confidence. That's what they're trained to do. And the key to that is, if you wait until you're super confident, it's too late to make the decision already. At that point, the decision has been made for you, because you have 100% confidence, or really close to 100% confidence, in which case you are pretty much 100% confident. That's not how we lead organizations. That's not how we're innovative. That's not how we, make a difference. And, but I do completely agree with you, Josh, and that is that you can't take yourself too seriously. And one of the things that I find, you guys don't know this, but we actually video record these sessions, and I don't look like I'm having that much fun on the camera. And I think that was maybe what you were alluding to earlier. But I have so much joy. I have so much joy for what I do. I have so much joy for even this silly process that we do, so that way you guys have some idea of, what's going on in different leaders' minds, and potentially giving the average person, right? There's no limitations to knowing how, Ann Daters thinks. You can go and Google her name and listen to her podcast. And granted, I may not do that great of a job of getting the best pieces of her out, but that's one of the benefits that we have with podcasts is, you don't have to be someone with stature to be able to access Joe Dively or Dr. Bullock. You can just come onto the podcast and listen to what is important to them, and you get to have a piece of who they are, even if you don't have that close relationship. And so my hope is that that's valuable for you. It builds you up as a person. And granted, I'm not necessarily interviewing world-renowned leaders or anything like that, but I'm picking amazing people that have amazing stories. And I didn't know Dr. Bullock's story about his dad. So I'm intrigued to go pick up that book and see what that looks like. So looking ahead, Dr. Bullock, what impact do you hope to have and to leave here at Lakeland College? I mean, you mentioned Dr. Luther, which had significant impact.
Amazing impact.
And so I just wonder, kind of, as you think, and I know you're super humble, and so I know this is a challenge to make a statement like this, but that's not what this is about. It's not about touting yourself, but like, when you think back 20 or 30 years from now, what do you hope people will recognize and see your fingerprint here at Lakeland College?
I hope people will recognize we as leaders, as a leadership team, have done what we can to ensure that Lakeland College is here providing education, relevant education for the times for those who need it. I think you're aware, Chris, we worked with our board of trustees on a 10-year master facility and landscaping plan, and that's to ensure all of our facilities are prepared for the next 50 years. We've been around just since 1966, so almost 60 years. And we want to make sure the college is going to be around and able to serve students into the future. And so we're making sure our buildings and grounds are all in shape so that we can do that. And I think that would be the greatest testament, is if Lakeland College continues to thrive and provide the education that's needed by our students, by the businesses who are looking for a skilled workforce, and by our community. I think that would be a testament to saying we did the right things, that we made a difference.
So let me give you a few things that I think you've done. The signage is beautiful.
Thank you.
I mean, I don't know who oversaw that. Amazing. I love the sign that's on the interstate. Every time Lisa and I drive by it, she's like, Lakeland College. This week, she was actually in Effingham with me. And so she saw the sign down there that said Lakeland College. She's like, wait, we're in Effingham. And I was like, yeah, they have two buildings. She's like, they have two buildings here? So, I showed her Cluthy, and then we went over and saw your new building. I don't even know what you call it.
Effingham Technology Center.
Okay, the Effingham Technology Center, which is literally right across the street almost from my office. And so just the other thing is the campus just looks a lot different. So we had temporary buildings on campus when I was here. Those are gone. This building is beautiful. Like, when I pulled up, just the visibility from the parking lot is way different than when I was here. Because we had textbook rental right over here. I mean, it just looks a lot different. We have a couple of new buildings on campus. If that doesn't speak to who you are and what your team has done here, it's phenomenal.
Well, thank you.
But anyways, I just wanted to wrap up and just say thank you for taking the time to do this. I know that your time is extremely valuable, and these aren't super easy to carve out an hour and a half to do this. But I do think it's extremely valuable for the people that want to grow beyond themselves. And I had the benefit where I was invited to the table from someone who's phenomenal and invested in me and got me to who I am, where I'm at today. And the one thing that I always tell everybody is that in the history, I always had crazy opportunities to have what I would consider very contributing roles in organizations. And I never felt like I deserved any of them. So somebody outside saw me for what they thought I would be, and they invested in me. And so my hope is that if nothing else, those of you who are listening have the ability to use the information that we're giving you to better yourselves and to prepare yourselves for whatever adventure that you're looking for. And I'm just thankful that Dr. Bullock had the chance and the time to do this. And I look forward to catching up with you all very soon. Take care.